Hello, and welcome to Chad's ADHD 365 podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Christ Church School. Support comes from Christ Church School, a boarding school on Virginia's Rappahannock River. Students with learning differences in the Learning Skills program unlock their true potential within a top-tier mainstream high school. More at christchurchschool.org.
Hi, I'm Sarah Brown, and we're here with Judith Bass to talk today about how to select the right school for a child with ADHD and/or learning disabilities. Hi, Judith. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm an educational consultant, and I work exclusively with students who have ADHD, executive functioning issues, and learning differences in helping them find the right fit for schools and colleges.
If I was looking for a school for my child, what options are there?
Well, that's a really good question. There are lots of options, fortunately, depending on the part of the country you live in and the type of school district you have. Public schools could be a very good option. A lot of public school systems do a good job of supporting students with executive functioning, with ADHD issues, and really understanding that the flexibility they need to have to help these students learn those skills. If you're not in that area or you want to look for other things, there are private schools, local independent schools, and boarding schools that also can specialize or at least have a portion of their school having a program for students who have ADHD. And there are also therapeutic boarding schools. Sometimes there's mental health issues where a student with ADHD also may have some depression or anxiety from that. And there are schools that will also work on the mental health piece. So there's a lot of options.
Are there programs out there that adapt their programs specifically to the students that have ADHD or learning disabilities?
Yes, there are. There are schools that work on coaching, have executive function coaching, and work on executive function skills. There are schools that are schools for neurotypical students, but have a program that focuses maybe 25% or so of their population on students who learn differently. And, as you probably know, a lot of students with ADHD also have a comorbid issue. So ADHD and dyslexia, ADHD and autism, there are lots of schools that really focus on those issues. So not all schools serve all students who learn differently. And that's an important distinction. So parents really need to look to see if their child's needs can be served.
If I have a child that has learning disabilities and ADHD, but not autism, that he may be more appropriately placed at one school as opposed to another?
Yes, because one school might have more social skills and more life skills in part of it, whereas the student who maybe has good social skills doesn't need that, but still needs the executive function coaching.
What would the first thing be that a parent should do when they are searching for the right school for their child?
Well, this is very important. I'm glad you asked that question, because the first thing a parent should do is make sure they have a full recent evaluation of their child. So if they can get a neuropsychological testing or a psychoeducational test, that gives them the full picture, and it really helps them understand the child's strengths as well as challenges, because you want to think about teaching to the students' strengths wherever they go. They are going to have to work on their areas of challenge. So for example, if you understand that your child is very, very weak in reading, let's say, or their executive functioning gets in the way, you want to make sure that you look for a school that will have executive function coaching. Maybe is it built into the curriculum, or is it a separate side bar that you either pay extra for or happens once a week? There's a lot of variety. But I would say having that report gives you a list of recommendations from the psychologist about what you should look for in a school as well. Also, it's important to note that it is expensive to get testing, there's no question. But some states in the country do a really good job in their public schools of testing. So that would be the first place to start. If you know that your system does a really good job and will do a thorough set of evaluations, that would be a good place to go. However, you should also look at public universities. A lot of them in their graduate psychology departments do sliding scale testing. They sometimes have a long waiting list, but it's good to get your name on the waiting list ahead of time. And then they will do really, really good, thorough testing as well.
You mentioned coaching. Some of the schools might have coaching for specific issues.
Yes. So for students who haven't really developed strong executive function skills, they need help getting started. They need help finishing. They need help following directions or staying focused or planning. Many of these schools will have built into their program the study skills and the skills for independence, how to become an independent learner, built right into the curriculum. You want the student, by the time they finish high school, should be ready for college, not just academically. Their independence as a learner needs to be established, because they can be a straight A student, but if they can't do the work on their own, they're really not going to be as successful. And one of the benefits of, let's say, a boarding school or an independent school is they have that flexibility to build all these things into the curriculum.
So how does a parent go about finding this out?
Good question there too. Look in your local area. There are a lot of private independent schools around the country and boarding schools. The majority of them, I would say, belong to the National Association of Independent Schools. And boarding schools have, in addition to that, the Association of Boarding Schools. And you can go on their websites and see what's offered and read about the schools, and you can find out what they offer. What I would say is see what you need first. Create a list of priorities. What matters to you as a parent? What features do you need to have in a school? So, for example, you want to make sure the school has good communication. Do they let you know what's happening? Are you getting updates about your child, for example? Do they understand your child's needs specifically? What are some examples of how they support specifically the issues your child has? If your child has dyslexia, what do they use? Do they use audiobooks? Do they teach the children assistive technology? With ADHD, do they have distraction reduced settings? Do they give extra time regularly? There's just so many things to look for. You want to know if they're caring and nurturing. Are they flexible, and do they do an individualized learning approach? You want to know if they spend as much time learning how to learn as they do on the academics.
So deciding on a school, you then go down and interview staff there to find out more information?
In a sense, you do. You're basically doing it as a research project. You think about research, you're going to go through a few different areas, a few different schools to compare. You would start with the admissions counselor, and you would find out if that school offers what your child needs and ask the admissions counselor some questions. For example, are there some parents I could speak to of other students who have gone there? You can go to an open house that the school has. Usually now they're virtual. You can see if there are parent panels. A lot of high schools and even elementary schools have parent panels that you can sit in on and ask questions. You can also ask, is there an Orton Gillingham tutor? Are there executive function coaches? Can I talk to one of them? Can I find out how they work if this seems like a good match for my child? You should thoroughly investigate. And then you want to know, what is a typical student profile at your school? Who wouldn't do well there is another question to ask, and find out what they don't want to have. And do you have a program that's for students with ADHD and learning differences, or is it the whole school? And if it's the whole school, what's the profile of all of the students? And as I said earlier, is executive function part of the curriculum? Are they learning this in their regular classrooms? And then lastly, what's very important is there's a flexibility in evaluating the student. A lot of the private schools that have that flexibility and understand that all students learn differently, they have multiple modes of showing mastery. Not everyone's a test taker, but someone else could do a great PowerPoint and present it to the class, or write a play, or present in some way. But that flexibility is so important for students who might not be able to read and write as well as they can act. And so there's a lot of benefit to students and really show their creativity.
Yeah, I like your comparison to a research project, because it sounds like this is this is a lot of work finding an appropriate school for your child.
It is a lot of work, but it is worth it in the long run, because unfortunately, what happens with younger children is that if you're not meeting their needs right away, they start to feel that something's wrong with them. And what we want them to know is there's nothing wrong with them. They just might have a different brain, they learn differently, and they just need to be in a different setting, and then they'll thrive. That's the hardest part. And I would say that use your gut as a parent, your gut feeling. If someone else tells you there's nothing wrong and you don't really think that's true, get another opinion, because parents are usually on target with their children.
Is there anything else that you would tell parents to do in picking a school?
If you're thinking about a boarding school, you first want to think about if your child has ever been away from home before. If you have a younger child, middle school, let's say, or high school, you might want to think about a short summer program somewhere, even if it's a camp, if they haven't been away from home, to spend 3 or 4 weeks away and see how that goes before the full year. Also, be honest and transparent about your child's strengths and weaknesses. It's not helpful to try to hide some of those negatives, because you're not serving your child well if the school can't support your child. There will be other schools that will support your child and will understand and accept. And the other thing that's really important is if your school that you're looking at doesn't want your child because of a particular characteristic, why would you want your child to go there? There are so many other choices where they're going to be welcomed with open arms. And I would also say the last thing is, if you're feeling overwhelmed and unsure, there are educational consultants who help families find the high schools, the elementary schools, the middle schools, and they assist them in finding a good fit by visiting the schools, by getting to know the family, and being able to give you a list of maybe 5 or 6 schools so that you're not frantically searching through hundreds. And that can give you some peace of mind to know that at least you're in the right direction and you've got someone helping you.
Oh, and where do you find an educational consultant?
I belong to an organization called IECA, the Independent Educational Consultants Association. And on their website, they have listings of consultants all over the country, and it lists their specialties. Some people specialize in schools and colleges. Other people specialize in schools, but specifically students with learning differences and ADHD, and the same with colleges. So you can narrow down a person who understands how to work with these students. And even more importantly, we have a designation called a certified educational planner, and that really is the credential in the field. So if you're looking for someone who you want as a professional, look for a certified educational planner, and then you know that person has been in practice for a long time and has really the knowledge to help you. And one more thing that I just want to mention: don't focus just on the learning differences and on the ADHD. Focus on your child. Is your child an athlete? You need to have sports at the school. Is he an introvert? You maybe want a smaller school. So don't just focus on the learning part, focus on the whole child and what they need for their whole being.
A holistic approach to education.
Exactly.
This has been very informative. I've learned about educational consultants and many things to help me find a school for my child.
Well, thank you for inviting me today.
Thanks.
Support comes from Christ Church School, a boarding school on Virginia's Rappahannock River. The Learning Skills program at Christ Church helps students with ADHD and other learning differences unlock their true potential. School should not hurt. With 25% of the student body in the program, a high level of support is woven into a world-class mainstream education. 100% of students are accepted at four-year colleges and universities. More at christchurchschool.org. Thank you for listening to another episode of Chad's ADHD 365 podcast.